is the courage to get help when it would be easier to pretend. This is, in my opinion, every man's story. Because secrets are dangerous. And secrets for leaders are particularly dangerous. Leader, if you have a big secret, I promise you, you don't know this, I promise you, you lead with a limp. You are compensating. The people who know you best know something's up. The people who are around you most know something's wrong. And you think you've got it covered and you don't think it's coming out, and you've built enough walls and you've built enough appropriate distance, but people know. And the sharpest people know the most, and the sharpest people are going to leave. And the people who aren't all that sharp, they're going to stay. And they're going to believe you, and they're going to believe in you, and eventually you're going to disappoint them. It's much easier to try to keep secrets than it is to be transparent. Leaders, you should fear the consequences of concealment more than the consequences of confession. And we all fear the consequences of confession. All of us do. This may be the most significant act of courage you ever engage with in your life. When you finally say to someone, I can't handle this anymore, I need help. You see, but I just feel like I'm so weak. It's because you are so weak. And you know what you've told your congregation and your youth groups and other people? You've told it, you've preached it, you've taught it. God uses the weak. Haven't you taught that? Haven't you said that God doesn't depend on our ability, it's His ability. It's not about, ability, it's about availability and all those cute things we tell middle school kids and high school kids all the time. You know what? You're right. And in your weakness is His strength, but His strength is only available when we are willing to open our hands and show somebody our weakness. So for somebody here, it's time for you to march down into that valley and face that Goliath. And facing that Goliath means you share it with somebody and you ask for help. And here's what you'll discover. The humility is liberating. In fact, please don't miss this. If you teach teenagers this. If you teach men this. Humility is an invitation. Throughout the Old and New Testament, the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, humility is always an invitation for God to do something unusual. Pride shuts the door on people, and pride shuts the door on God. In fact, pride and fear are cells without windows. Men and women, if you need help, get help. I'm just telling you, that's your Pharaoh. That's your Goliath. That's your Jordan River. That's your Red Sea. That's your moment. That is as big and significant in your life and as it relates to the life and the future of your marriage and your family as anything you may ever face. It is always easier to hide and to pretend. But God is calling you to the edge of your fear, and He's saying, transformation from the inside out for you is going to begin with one little baby step that will feel like the most courageous thing you've ever done. And it will be the catalyst as it relates to you personally and your ministry. It'll be the catalyst for extraordinary. The last one is the courage to submit when it would be easier to power up. Leaders, sometimes people ask me, what's your biggest concern about the church? What's your biggest concern about pastors? What's your biggest concern as you look at the life of the church? I have two biggest concerns, or you can't have two biggest. I have two big concerns. Maybe share one of them later this week. But one of my biggest concerns is this ridiculous, crazy model that I see more and more and more, especially with church planners and church leaders, that somehow that I'm the guy and God speaks to me and somehow I lead, and we have kind of this pyramid of power that all begins with me. It takes far more courage to submit to the governing authorities that God has placed over you than it is to lead as if you have no governing authorities except the invisible God who only speaks to you in your quiet time. Now, here's the thing, okay? I hate to burst your bubble. You are not the smartest person in your organization. You're just the leader. And that's okay. In fact, if you are the smartest person in your organization, you are not a very good leader. The goal is to be the dumbest person at the table. That's the goal. And if you're the dumbest person at the table, you will look like the smartest leader in the room. But if you've run everybody off because you don't listen, if you've run everybody off because you can't submit, if you can't take no for an answer, you are a sorry leader, and you'll feel so empowered because nobody can tell you what to do. It takes courage to surrender. It takes courage to submit. But don't forget, I've already said it. Humility is an invitation to God to do extraordinary things. Just read your Bible. The man who needed advice less than anybody who ever needed advice, who didn't even take his own advice, said it this way. He said, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors. But the key to many advisors is listening to the many advisors. And if you can't listen, you don't learn. And if you don't learn, you're not much of a leader. So if you have a difficult time taking no for an answer, you got work to do. If you have a difficult time submitting and surrendering to your board, you've got work to do. Because here's something that you probably already know. Great leaders, you know this. Great leaders don't make all the decisions. Great leaders make sure that all the decisions are great. When is the last time you celebrated somebody else's idea? When is the last time you said, you know what, I'm just gonna, you guys decide. I don't have to make all the decisions in this organization. If somebody told you somewhere along the way that leadership is about getting your way, they gave you some really bad advice. Let me ask you this. What do you call somebody who always has to have their way? Not leader, right? Some of you got some 4-year-old leaders running around the house. You got a middle school leader. You don't call them leaders. You call them immature. At some point along the way, you've got to decide to trust the systems that God has put in place in your organization and in your churches. The most courageous decision that our organization ever made was a decision where I can tell you what the decision is in just a minute, but before I tell you what that is, this was like big decision. This was one of those decisions, you don't know how it's gonna work out for several years. And if you make the wrong decision several years down the road, you've either got something to celebrate or you got trouble, one of those kind of decisions. So I got all of our elders together. I called in a couple of guys that weren't serving as elders at the time. So there's about 12, well, there were more than 12 people in the room, but there were 11 of us who could actually vote on this decision. And we talked for several hours. And I said, okay, we got to decide. So we voted. And the vote was 10-1. And I was the one. They outvoted me 10-1. I mean, I tried, I manipulated, I used my persuasion skills. I told them about the history, when we were all done, 10-1. And the decision we were trying to make is we had our original first campus, North Point Community Church, now Alpharetta, not too far from here. We had purchased property 20 miles north of us that we wanted to put a second campus. We had purchased property 20 miles south of us where we wanted to eventually put a third campus. And so I called this meeting for us to decide which one are we going to build first. Because the one was about $30 million. The other one was going to be like $45 million. I mean, either one of those would sink you. I mean, either one of those becomes the legendary story of Andy and his stupid decision to build a my reputation was on the line. So we're going to decide which one we do first. And the smart guys in the room said, I think we should do both at the same time. And I'm like, Because see, what happens is you guys vote, we do both at the same time, and then I know what happens. Things start going bad, the money's not coming in, and you and your families leave in the dark of night. Andy, we just feel like God wants us to go to such and such a church. I'm like, whoa. You voted me. See, it's my name, my reputation. Andy Stanley does what was he thinking? The church is in all this debt. I'm going, guys, I tried to talk them out of it 10-1. And then I had a decision to make. And I made the decision I hope you'll make. I trusted the system. I trusted the people that God had placed around me. I'm the boss, but I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the organization. I'm just not all that smart. I look way smarter than I really am because I'm not the smartest person in the organization and hopefully never the smartest person in the room. So we voted and we did simultaneous, enormous capital campaigns. And we built both buildings and it worked. But I was outvoted. If you're not outvoted every once in a while, you may be doing something wrong. And every once in a while, you're going to be tested. And guys, come on. I have an opinion. I have an opinion about everything, right? Just like many of you, right? It's not necessarily right, but I have it anyway. It doesn't matter if it's right. It's my opinion, right? So it's not easy for me to go, well, just whatever. I'm not whatever guy, right? You don't get to do what I do if you're just the whatever guy. But here's what here's what you need to know. Every once in a while, you've got to submit to the people that God has placed over you. And when you do, it will feel for you, depending on your personality and the way you're wired, it will feel like an extraordinary act of courage. But one single act of courage is often the catalyst for extraordinary.